Segue. To continue at once with the next musical selection or composition.
Segue. To make a transition directly from one section or theme to another.
To move smoothly and unhesitatingly from one state, situation, condition, or element to another.
Segue. To perform in the manner of the preceding section.
Segue. To make a transition from one thing to another smoothly and without interruption.
This is Segue with Dean Aldemaro Romero, a weekly program exploring the lives and work of the people of the College of Arts and Sciences at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville.
Hello everybody. Professor Garrett Schmidt was born in Maryville, Illinois. He obtained a bachelor's in music from Eastern Illinois University and a master's in music from the University of Rochester in New York. Today, he is an assistant professor of music at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. Welcome to Segue, Professor Schmidt.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, I always ask this question to musicians because this mythology that all musicians is like Mozart. They start playing their instruments at 3 or 4 years old. Mm-hmm. At what age did you start playing the trumpet?
The trumpet. That would be 4th grade, I think, in Alhambra School District. 4th grade. How old are you when you're in 4th grade? 8, 9?
Probably
10?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, definitely not 5.
Uh-huh.
I think back then the trumpet would have been too heavy for me. I was pretty tiny. So I think around 4th grade is when I started, maybe in 5th grade.
Were you playing another instrument before that? Because a trumpet is not an easy instrument for a small child to play.
Right, yeah. I was playing guitar before that, maybe in 2nd grade, taking lessons with my brothers and a guy out in Pocahontas, I think. So I played guitar a little bit beforehand, but trumpet's kind of my thing now. Well, it's definitely my thing now.
Now, why trumpet?
Well, my oldest brother had a trumpet. That's the instrument he started on in Alhambra, and he went on through high school, and I think it was just convenience for my parents. Maybe we had an extra instrument lying around, so I just started with trumpet. And then I ended up taking my brother's nice trumpet when he graduated from high school. I was playing on a cornet that had a bell that was kind of shaped like a taco shell. And when my oldest brother Chris graduated, I took the good one, which is nice. Still have it up in my office right now.
Okay, now we understand why you chose a particular instrument, but the question is, why did you choose a particular genre like jazz?
That's a good question. I just like how there's a lot more options in jazz. In the classical world, so many people have done it so many different ways, and it would just be me trying to imitate someone instead of trying to create my own voice or song or solo. I'm trying to do my own thing instead of steal from everyone else. Maybe steal is a hard word, but that's what I'm trying to do, is create instead of mimic.
Okay. Now, after you graduated, you tried New York.
I did.
And which is the mecca for many artists in many ways. And I remember my father, who was also a musician, told me that many years ago, I can't remember when he was there were 27,000 musicians registered in the union.
Wow.
Of which only 3,000 has some sort of permanent / continuous job.
Uh-huh.
It is that difficult for a musician to get a job in New York?
Well, for me it was. It was. But there's a whole bunch of different ways to be busy in New York. You can be doing small group gigs all the time at a different club every night of the week, or you can be doing a Broadway show. I think a lot of people keep busy. I don't know. Most of the work isn't union work, so they probably wouldn't consider it an actual job, but it is work. And to stay busy there, it's definitely not an easy thing. But when you are busy, it's really rewarding.
Now, do you feel that experience, first of all, how many years were you in New York City?
About 2.5.
Okay. Do you consider that experience during that time also kind of a learning experience for yourself as a performer.
Very much so.
Why?
The highest caliber of musician, they're all there. All the greatest jazz players, they're there, and just to be surrounded by that environment, you really try and soak it up as a sponge. You learn a lot that way, and getting to play with the people who are at the top of the jazz game is a really special learning experience. I can't say enough about the people I met there or who I played with. It was an extremely good learning experience.
And then you became a teacher,
That's
which
right.
is a big turn. So why that?
Well, I always wanted to be a teacher. I think my high school band director kind of gave me that. He planted that seed in my head where I could do music as a career and really enjoy teaching people every day. Jim Childers, he teaches down at Marion now, I think, but he planted that seed when I was a freshman in high school. And I've always wanted to teach. Giving back is something that's really important, and kind of shaping the next generation of musician is a really nice thought anyways. So I'm just happy to be a part of that here.
Okay. Well, let's listen now to a portion of a piece titled Dystopia, performed with you at the Eastman School of Music.
That's right.
Okay, let me ask you another question. You hear sometimes that some musicians classify themselves as a studio musicians or live performing musicians. Do you consider either one, or do you think that that classification is too artificial?
I think anymore to have that classification doesn't really exist. I think it's just you're a musician, and you have to be able to function in the studio. You have to be able to function live.
Read really fast.
Yeah, read well,
yeah.
Perform it perfectly the first time.
Yeah.
But you also have to be able to communicate in a live setting as well. I think all well-rounded musicians would probably agree with that.
Okay. One of the courses that you teach at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, is jazz arranging.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I think is tremendously important for that particular genre, because most jazz that you listen to sounds like an arranging or something else.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, what is the key things you teach your students about arranging in jazz?
Well, usually it's just the basics. You know, what notes go over what chord and stuff like that. But the thing I really try and teach is to not make things too difficult. If you are arranging a piece by Miles Davis, there's a lot of material in his version that you should take, because he doesn't care, you know. So an arrangement, try and keep it like, what am I trying to say here?
Keep it straight in some certain ways, or modify too much, or?
Yeah, there's so much material in our original recording
Mm-hmm.
that made it famous or made Miles popular, that you should really dive in with arrangers' ears and try and take little parts of either Miles' solo or the tune itself and write it in your own group. Arrange it for your own group. Mm-hmm. So if the Miles Davis Quintet was trumpet and saxophone and rhythm section, and you want to do it a different way, you can have a guitar player or just rearranging it and trying to keep some of the essence of what Miles had, but doing it in your own way a little bit as well.
And there are many types of styles of arranging things. People just take the basic music phrase and take it from there, and everything else doesn't sound like the original composition. To people who actually change a little more than the tempo itself, and a little bit of orchestration, but not much, and still they make sound the piece totally different. And sometimes maybe the difference between Make It or Break It as a popular song. What kind of secrets do you teach your students along those lines?
Well, I really do think that keeping it simple is the most important part. Like you just said, you could just change the tempo and it could be a completely different composition in itself. But I really try and teach my students to really pay attention to what happened in the early times when the arrangements started happening. Jazz is so young, but the history is really rich. So if you go back and really study what, Duke Ellington and Count Basie and Thad Jones and people like that were doing, you'll get a lot of good information from those three sources, and there's more sources too.
I'm sure. Well, let's listen now to a portion of Then What with Garrett Schmidt at the trumpet. Now, in your experience, how can you tell that a student has what is needed to be a very good jazz arranger?
Oh, to be a jazz arranger? That's a good question. They obviously have to have a strong sense of music theory, first and foremost, just to know how chords work and how they function in a particular setting. They also have to be good listeners. Like I said, the best students are sponges. If you can gain something from every recording that you listen to, great. That is a good student. Otherwise, you really have to put the time in. It's not an easy thing to do, and if you make time for it, everyone will learn more if you spend a little bit of extra time with things.
How about telling when a student will become a very good trumpet player?
That's a good question. I think I got a couple of them right now. It's kind of the same, a strong work ethic. They're willing to, maybe wake up before classes start and warm up before 8 a.m. music theory. They have to be good listeners. Got to work hard and, think about trumpet in as many different ways as possible. Not so much this is the only way to do it. There's 1,000 ways to do it. Yeah. Just have an open mind and work hard.
Now, one of the main characteristics of jazz is improvisation, the ability to improvise things as you are playing it. And some people think that improvisation is something like in the movie Amadeus, where Mozart heard a piece for the first time of Salieri and then makes fun of different arrangements about that. But in fact, improvisation is something that is studied in music schools. And I would like you to explain a little bit that to our audience that maybe is finding that this is kind of a contradiction in terms. You have to study improvisation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can't just sit down at the piano and, well, that is improvising. Whether it's good or not, I guess that's a different thing. But, improvising is something that is learned, not just done immediately. And the best way to learn it is through transcription, for one. Right now I'm working on some Clark Terry transcriptions, and he's a St. Louis guy, trumpet player, amazing. But that's how you learn. You find out what the masters were doing, and you kind of sit there with your pencil and find out what note, how it works here, how it works there. It's kind of nitpicky, but once you get the fundamental idea down, it really starts to open up some possibilities, and then you can just work from there. You get one little thing that you like from Clark Terry, and then you do it in all 12 keys for a long time, and then you kind of forget about it, but then it'll come out sometime when you're playing, and you're like, oh, that's what I learned from Clark Terry 3 months ago,
Okay.
It is a process.
Now, you have played first trumpet at Studio 54 in New York, at the Tonight Show, at the Radio City Hall, among others. Of all those experiences, which one has been the most satisfying for you as a performer?
I think Studio 54.
Why?
Well, I don't know. I had a bug. I had a Broadway bug for probably the last 5 years, where I knew that's really what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to New York. I wanted to play on Broadway and give it a shot. And I got to do it earlier this year, March till I moved back here. It was great. Everybody was super nice. I kind of felt I had achieved my goal, and now I can move on to the next thing, which is this. It was really special. Doing the Tonight Show was really fun too.
I'm sure.
But it was a little too early in the morning,
Well, most people don't realize those things are tape.
Yeah.
In fact, it's a problem for singers, because singers have to be either awake all night long for a morning performance, or only sing at night because their their throats are not working that early in the morning.
Right. The Tonight Show is in the afternoon. The Today Show, I think we had to be there at 6 a.m.
6 a.m.
And my face doesn't work at 6 a.m., so that was interesting.
Okay. But what I mentioned about singers is also true for musicians. They need some time in the day to get ready for it. What kind of preparation do you go through in order to get ready for a performance?
I like to get, if I'm performing at Studio 54, let's say, I like to get there maybe an hour and a half before the gig starts, get dressed, get comfortable, try and relax, and just do a normal trumpet warm-up for maybe 30 minutes and look over some things that I may have screwed up or may have not screwed up the previous night. And it's not too stressful. Just be there early and warm up a little bit, and you're ready to go.
Okay, well, let's listen now to a portion of an untitled piece, the title untitled, I guess, with Garrett Schmidt at the trumpet. Okay, I think now I'm going to put you in a difficult situation. Who is your favorite jazz composer?
Well, I think I have to say Maria Schneider, just because I got to play with her and with her group in New York and in Europe. It's a really, really interesting mix of some classical elements and some jazz elements. And you can hear in her older records it's more big bandy, and now she just recorded a new record this summer that's not out yet, but it's more bridging the gap between classical and jazz, and I really, really like that type of composition.
Okay. Now, in jazz, there have been many, many top trumpet players, very famous, and also as a composers, Louis Armstrong, Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie, Art Farmer. Which one is your favorite one?
I have to go with Freddie Hubbard for this one.
Why?
I think he's just the best at the trumpet. He's such a good trumpet player.
In terms of technique? Or
in terms of technique, yeah. Clifford Brown was one of them, too. He has a really good technique. But for some reason, I always gravitated towards Freddie. I always imagined he can do everything a saxophone player can do, but on a trumpet, which is really, really crazy to think about.
Now, in addition to that, if you had the opportunity to have met, even play with any of these big names, which one would have been your ideal one?
Oh, gosh.
I told you I was going to put you in a corner.
Yeah, this is tough. Oh, gosh. I think it would still have to be Freddie. If there was a second, it would be Clark Terry, I think. Just because he was a member of all those big bands that I mentioned, the Basie and Ellington. Lots of knowledge in that man's brain. I think I'd like to meet him sometime too.
Okay, very good. Now, you have also played in Europe, and people don't realize this in this country, but jazz is bigger in Europe than it is here, by far.
Yeah, it is.
With many summer festivals and many places or venues for that. What would you say is the main difference in terms of audiences between Europe and the United States?
It's kind of weird to think about, isn't it?
Yeah.
That the American art form is more popular in Europe. Yeah. It's like pizza over here.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really know what the difference is between the audiences, but in Europe there's always an audience, and they're always really excited to see it, to hear it. Not to say that doesn't happen here also. But I think maybe it is kind of that mystique of this is the all-American art form over here. We have to see what it's all about. It might be the mystique about it. I'm not sure.
What I also found interesting in Europe is that the taste of Europeans for jazz is very eclectic. I mean, they pretty much like different types of jazz, from very modern, from Coltrane to now, to more classical type, more Duke Ellington type of things. And I wonder if the American public doesn't really have a culture for jazz. They take it for granted. What do you think about that?
You might be right about that, taking it for granted. Since it's technically ours, maybe we are. I don't think there's a huge population of people in the United States that know a lot about modern jazz. I would think more so people know about more classic jazz like Glenn Miller and Count Basie and people like that. But there are pockets of people everywhere, I'm sure, that appreciate all parts of it. But I don't know. I don't know how we fix that.
Yeah.
But
and St. Louis is one of those pockets where you can listen to very good jazz. Very, very well. Tell me something else. When it comes to different types of jazz, do you think that jazz continues to evolve today to new frontiers? What can we expect from jazz to sound like in the, let's say, 5 or 10 years from now?
Oh, gosh. That's a good question. I'd like to know. I'd like to fast forward and then come back and be the hippest guy on the planet. I don't know. I expect a lot more electronics, really. There's this big band writer now, Darcy James Argue, who's based out of New York, I think. And he has electric guitars, distorted guitars, some types of auxiliary percussion that are really interesting. I think we probably will get more electric, hopefully not electric enough where there's not a need for trumpet players, but I do see it going in that direction, and there's a lot of stuff like that happening now, which is really good.
Do you think there is more tendency now towards, I would say, more even eclectic forms of jazz, in particular music in general, where you are mixing more and more different styles and ways of performing certain music.
I think so. I think rock is really a huge influence on more modern jazz, just because what's happening with drum set players and stuff like that. It's a mashup. It's a mashup of a lot of different styles.
And there has always been this I would say, back and forth between jazz and Latin music, and you can see in bossa nova, you can see in other type of things. Given that increasing demographics in this country of Hispanics, do you see more of that combination of Latin music with jazz in the near future?
I think it's already happening. Lots of Maria Schneider's music has a lot of Brazilian influence, and rightfully so. All the Brazilian rhythms are so cool and different, and it's straight but not boring in any way. It's a lot of interesting stuff came from there, and I'd love to have a Latin jazz ensemble here. That would be really fun. That's probably a few years away, but that would be interesting. But yeah, it's already, I think that's already happening. There's a lot of Brazilian and Latin influence.
As we get more international students at the university, do you expect also when those students come to take music lessons here in some way also to have some of the influence of their native countries pour into the music they perform here?
Absolutely, yeah. And you'll probably run into that a lot. One thing that isn't easily translatable is the swing rhythm for maybe the African countries and stuff like that, just because things are flat there. So the swing rhythm is probably the hardest thing to convey to an international student or something like that. But I would love to have some international students like hip me to some of their what they think about when they play. That would be really nice.
Okay. Well, in the minute that we have left, tell us about your next big project.
Oh, next big project. Well, I'm trying to finish a tune for the concert jazz band right now, which isn't a huge project. That'll be done pretty soon. But I would like to have my first record come out soon. I think I have some good tunes that could be recorded to have my first, solo CD, the Garrett Schmidt quintet or sextet or something like that. So hopefully that'll be coming out soon. That would be nice.
Okay. Well, let us know whenever this recording becomes public available, because I'm really interested in listening to your own recording. And essentially, I think it's very important for any of our listeners to learn more about what kind of music is being produced here at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. Well, thank you very much to Professor Garrett Schmidt from the Department of Music. And next week, we're going to have Dr. Elizabeth Cali of the Department of English Language and Literature at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, who will be talking about African American literature and its connection with Africa. So stay tuned.
This has been Segue with Dean Aldemaro Romero, a production of the Department of Mass Communications at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. All rights reserved, 2014.